Welcome to this week's video where the rebuild officially starts. Okay, we start off right where we left off in last video. Just finished the equal length high rise turbo manifold. If you didn't watch that video, you should. This thing's badass. It's cool as shit. So we'll weld that another time, but we need to get this out and get it back on the engine stand. That way we can start disassembling it so we can ship it out to mazworx and get a stage 2 sleeved block. I'm going to see how much it costs, but they offer 9-to-1. I want 10-to-1 pistons, so we'll see how much extra that will cost and if I do it or not, but I probably will. But anyway, this video, it starts and we tear down a sr20vet. There's a couple of differences. I've added the floating rocker arms on the exhaust side, so I have floating rocker arms on both, where the factory VET doesn't have it on the exhaust because they made enough power. They made 280 without VVL on the exhaust, so they just left it off. Anyway, let's start tearing this out. We got to pull the engine. And now she's out. So the next step is we need to disconnect the trans, and then disconnect the adapter plate, put it on the engine stand. Just like that. It's very easy. So now is the tedious part of tearing all of this off. Because, I mean, they don't even want the knock sensor or even this on there. I don't know if I'll take that off though. But, I mean, I think, well, they replaced these freeze plugs, but that's an actual bolt, so they won't replace that. But gotta take this off, the oil filter relocation kit, the water pump, the alternator, the oil pump, the head needs to come off the block. So I've got to figure out where to store all this stuff first. But let's come over here and look at this again. Oh man, I'm happy with it. Well, instead of time-lapsing, I think I'll just use some YouTube magic to get all the accessories off. Okay. There's all the accessories off. No, I mean, it was like an hour worth of work with some impacts. Even got the Tarks off. Oh, I left that, so I still need to take that off. But we're ready to take the valve cover and the head off. So we kind of got to clean up some before we can do that. So that's the next step. Okay, got the valve cover off, got the tensioner off. I put the crank bolt back in it and spun the engine to where none of them are, like, all the pistons are halfway, so I'm not gonna bend valves, even though it doesn't matter because I'm getting all the valves replaced. But regardless, that's how you should do it. That or top dead center. But yeah, so we are now ready. I've got the tension off the chain. By the way, this is all the bolts that get your car like in your engine bolted in, and then this is all the bolts that hold everything on the engine. It's not very many when you really think about it. I don't know, maybe I've been doing it long enough that doesn't look like a lot. But you can see how clean this fucking engine is. I used Mobil 1 race oil on this. 15 W40, I do believe. But like I said before, it doesn't change when a madman's behind the wheel, ignoring his data. But you can also see a factory VET has the floating rocker arm on the intake. but they are missing them on the exhaust, and I've gone ahead and put floating rocker arms on the exhaust as well, so it's true VVL on both. Like I said earlier, they made too much power, so they didn't have to do that. But yeah, we need to take this off, take the cams off, so we can then undo the head bolts, or head studs, because I'm running ARPs, but they're under here. So we've got to take all this off to unbolt it and then put it all back together to ship it. And I've went ahead and broke all the intake bolts loose. You want to do from the outside in, just like when you tighten it, you do the inside out. Also, since I'm using a pneumatic, you want to loosen them just a little bit off the whole thing, because if you take this cam cap off, then this cam cap, and then this cam cap, it puts too much tension on these little bolts, and you can snap these bolts. So you always see there's tension on that one. So once you break them all loose like that, you hunt for the one with tension, and you can loosen that one. So you just kind of chase the tension. That way it's kind of equalizing the load on all the bolts. But yeah, so I'll keep doing that till this one's off, and then repeat the process over there. I've already got the all the head bolts off. Don't forget to take these screws off. A DET, these two are in here, not on the outside, but there's one here and one back here always. But we've got all the head bolts out. This thing should be ready. Yep. Okay. So obviously the piston did not like that, and it came back out the intake, it looks like, and got over here some. Unless that's just hot. Maybe it was just melting all the pistons. I mean, the ring was still holding. I don't see any sidewall damage. I mean, there's coolant residue there, but that's just from taking the head gasket or head off. I must have a broken ring. Interesting. It looks fine. Let me put the camera down and see if I can't find something off camera. Okay. So I even felt the cylinder wall and there was nothing there. Don't worry, I still have the head gasket on, so I'm setting the head on the head gasket, but look at that. So when the spark plug broke, it got sucked up in the exhaust valve, and I would assume it nicked the valve or you know, took a little chunk out, and then after driving with the fire for an hour, I mean, that is gone. Jeez. And it looks like there's some melting up there. There's a lot of calcium deposit in all of them. But the cylinder wall over there is fine. I may not even... I want it sleeved. Maybe this is unburnt fuel? That looks oil though. So... I really don't know. This is still inconclusive. If a ring was broken, the cylinder wall would be scratched. I've never seen a ring break and not at least score where it broke. I have no clue. I'm kind of just blown away. I mean, you can see that probably was the chunk of valve floating around in there that nicked that, not the ceramic from the plug. But the cylinder wall, I mean, you can still see the cross hatching everywhere. There's no like vertical scoring on it. Maybe a hair right there. So weird. I mean, but you can see there's some vertical wear there, so doesn't look any worse for wear. We know the head needs built. Okay, I got the block flipped over. I didn't rig this up until after it's dropped some oil, so it's a little dirty down there. I got all the bolts out. I just pried it. Yeah. So, a beautiful pickup tube. We need to take this windage tray off, and then, as you can see, we should be able to get to the rod bolts if I put it at top dead center or all the way down for each rod. So, also, there was no metal in the pickup tube. I slept on it last night, and I really, let me turn the light off. So I slept on it last night, and I really do think it's just the head. And because of the excess heat that was coming off that valve never being completely closed, it must have cooked our valve seals. And that's where the oil's coming from. Because the cylinder wall looks fine. And like I said earlier, if a piston ring broke, it would have shown on the wall. So we'll know for sure when I pull these out here in a second. But also I've got to take all the tensioner guides off as well. Okay, so I put the bolt back in the crank, rotated it so that 2 and 3 were up. And a little trick, you break the bolts loose, and then you hit the head. Did you see that drop? And that frees them, that frees the bearing off the crank. And it doesn't hurt anything to tap it like that, and that's how you do it. So let's push these out and we'll see what we see. Okay. So I pulled number 3 first. You can see something went in. Some debris was in the oil and came into this bearing and scored right down the middle of it. You can see my fingernail actually scratches the coating. So most of the nitrate coating is still there. But you can see whatever it was, it actually spun all the way around, scored there, and then it looks like it embedded itself right there. So there is some wear on the bearing, but like you see that left to right scratch, that's my fingernail. And I couldn't feel the other part. So really, there's slight wear on the bearing, but nothing, it's just an anomaly really. It looks like it dealt with itself. It wasn't about to spin. There's no brass showing across the piece. You can see the very top part has a little bit of more wear on it, but you can't even feel it. Like all that is super smooth. The only thing I can feel is I can feel the embedded piece up here. That notch. Just the notch, I guess. Anyway, as you can see, there's plenty of damage on the piston. And even on the side of it. I think there's 2 more, yeah, right there. But I've went through and looked at all the rings. The rings are good. So the block is perfectly fine. But like I said, I had already planned, made the money. That would have caused us problems 20,000 miles down the road or some shit like that. But crazy how strong this block is. Like, it started earlier. I'm sure in editing I'll fix it, but I said calcium deposit. That is aluminum deposits on the piston top. That's how hot it got. It started melting the head, the aluminum on the head. But the block, I could have fixed the head and thrown it right back together and kept running. But let's bulletproof this thing and make it as reliable as we can. We'll put 450 horsepower on it, and yeah, she's going to be a rocket. Absolute rocket. But all I've got to do, I've got to finish taking the pistons out. I'm going to leave the crank in there just the way it sits, so I'm not even going to undo any of the main. The last thing I have to do is take the rear main off, and then the block is ready to be shipped. And then I have to take all the VVL rockers out, and I have to take all the valves out and the valve train, so I can put the cams back in there and bolt them in and ship it. So I'll do all that off camera. If you go back a couple years ago, you can see me rebuild the valve train in this head. But yeah, that's all I got left, and then it's ready to ship. So that's the culprit. And that burned valve stem seal up here, I think. I think that's the only issue with the sr20. But we're getting a mazworx block and head anyway. Shit's crazy. Well, there's the block and the head together with all the shipping labels, and she's being shipped out to come back as a 2.2 SR 10-to-1 compression pistons. Guys, we are at FedEx and it is going to mazworx.